Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild chess game from the Chessable British Championship. It is Matthew J. Wadsworth versus Harry Grieve, and while the game is incredible and you guys will enjoy it, before we check out the game, there are some news that I am very interested in sharing with you. As the title suggests, Chess.com has made an offer to the Play Magnus Group to acquire them, or rather for the Play Magnus Group to join the Chess.com, and I will put a link to the Chess.com article that describes this in detail, although they didn't really explain all that much, as more information is to come. But there is a very nice video of basically an interview between Magnus Carlsen and Danny Range, where you can learn more about this. It's some 4 minutes and 30 seconds long, so you can check it out. It will be the first thing you see in the description below, so do check it out. But basically, for those of you who are maybe lazy to click on other links or something like that, I don't know, they are saying that Chess.com is excited to announce that we have submitted an offer to Play Magnus Group to join Chess.com. Magnus Carlsen and the management at Play Magnus are enthusiastic and have accepted the offer. We expect that it will take about 6 to 8 weeks for this process to finalize. Until that time, Chess.com and Play Magnus will remain independent companies. And there's more in the article, but if you guys are interested, do check it out. So that's basically about the news. What this means for chess, for the community, for the entire world, only time will tell, but things are definitely changing. Now, getting back to this game, it's truly a wild one. No wonder so many of you have suggested it. International Master Matthew Wadsworth versus FIDE Master Harry Grieve, like I said, from the Chessable British Championship, and it's from the final round, and it really is an important game, as I don't want to spoil too much, but one of these two gentlemen has won the entire event. So let's check it out, as there's quite a lot to enjoy. Many queens will be on the board. So here we have pawn to c4. Matthew opens with the English opening. We have e6, the Agincourt defense, g3, d5, and now bishop to g2, getting the bishop to the long diagonal. We have c6, and now knight to f3. We have d captures on c4, and this is a fairly standard position. You will see something like a4 here, you will see castles here, but here Matthew goes for knight to a3, and it's a very tricky idea, a very sneaky move that sort of baits black to go pawn to b5. Now it's basically a question: do you want to give up your bishop, mess up my pawn structure, go bishop captures, pawn captures? And this is most likely okay for black, but obviously white prepared this, and maybe white will have the edge of preparation. So here instead we have pawn to b5, but this is already well, it's not a blunder or anything like that, but it's an imprecision, to put it mildly, because after b5 here Matthew just played knight captures on b5, and it looks like, okay, I'm gonna capture, you're gonna move your knight, the bishop will be attacking the rook. Can't I do something about this? Well, not really, because after c captures on b5, the question is, where do you move the knight? And you can't move it to e5, because if you move it to e5, just knight to d7, you've already given up a knight for the rook. Now, if you give up another knight, you're not gonna be gaining all that much. And if you go for something like knight captures here, just bishop captures, and now the queen defends the rook. So after, for example, bishop captures, queen captures, black will be up too much material, and this is already winning for black. Another thing, after c captures on b5, you could play knight to h4. Now, this also opens up an attack towards the rook, but then g5, and again, you don't really have a good reply to this. You just have to go for bishop captures, and then the knight is captured, and black will have 1-2 pieces for the rook, which of course is much better for black. But there is this knight to g1 move, and the knight simply cannot be attacked on g1. It is impossible. And next move, bishop captures, rook on a8 is coming, and there's really no good way to stop this. See, if you play knight to c6 check to maybe give up the knight, of course it's impossible, because this comes with check. So here we have bishop to d7, and now bishop captures on a8. So okay, black wins the exchange, and after knight to c6 we even have a bishop captures, and now knight to f3 as the rook was attacked. Knight to f6, now comes b3, challenging this advanced pawn structure here, and bishop to c5. We have bishop to b2, also fianchettoing, and now queen to d5. So black did get some development in. Black does have the bishop pair, but all in all, white is just up material. So here, b captures on c4, b captures, and even bishop captures on f6, giving up both of the bishops, and it's a principal decision. You are up in material, you want to trade down as much as possible. G captures on f6, queen to c2, and now king to e7. We have rook to c1, now preparing to grab the pawn here, bishop to a3, not allowing this, kicking away the rook, so rook to b1, and now bishop back to d6. Saying that if you try and repeat this, I am more than happy with a perpetual here. So here we have queen to c3, and now queen to e4. We have rook to c1, again preparing to capture the pawn, and now bishop to d5. Harry cements the position very nicely. We have queen to a5, and now rook to a8. Defending the pawn on a7, we have king to f1, and now pawn to f5. We have pawn to h4, and now queen to g4. Now preparing to capture with the bishop on f3. So here we have queen to, not queen to a3, that would be terrible. Queen to c3, adding another defender to the knight, and now pawn to f4. And if you don't want to see f captures on g3, you definitely want to capture the pawn. So g captures, and now rook to g8. Even though black is down in material, black has a very, very active play, and white has to be incredibly precise not to just blunder the entire game away. For example, if you play something like rook to g1, seems like a good idea, just queen h3 check, and it's game over. After the king moves, just bishop captures on f3, removes the defender of the rook, and even if you capture here, you just get checkmated. Queen h1, rook g1, queen to g1 will be checkmate. So after this rook to g8 move, we have king to e1, and now bishop captures on f4, just reclaiming the pawn. Queen to a3 with check, king to f6, and now rook to f1. We have rook to d8, and now we have queen to c3 with check, pawn to e5, and now rook to g1, challenging the black queen, so queen to h5, and now queen to a5. And this is the only good way for white to continue, go after the pawn. If the pawn is defended, then you can start harassing the black king a little bit. So rook d7 defending the entire 7th rank, queen to a6 check, we have king to e7, and now queen back to a3 with check. King f6, again, black very happy with a repetition. You are attacking, but if white defends, you're just done material. So rook to c2, and now queen to f5. Attacking the rook on c2, so rook back to b2, and now bishop to e6. And here, what do you play? Here, queen to c3 was played, but you could also consider a move like e3. I'm just going to show it because it's super fun. It seems like it's a weird move to make because the knight is now undefended, so just moving the bishop should work for black. But it doesn't, because if you move, for example, bishop captures here, white can capture, and if rook to d3, saying, okay, now I'm going to capture the knight, there's queen g5 check, and this comes with check, of course, and after queen captures, h captures comes with check, and now after the king moves, you're just going to move the knight or defend the knight, and now you're just up in material and winning. And another thing is, after this e3 move, bishop captures, you don't even have to capture with the queen, you can actually capture with the f-pawn as well, because if queen captures, rook f1 just wins the queen. So e3 was definitely a move to consider here. But okay, queen to c3 was played. We have h6 now, taking away that g5 square from white's pieces, as you've seen how deadly it could be. Rook to b5 now, stopping any advancements of the pawn. For the moment, you can't push the pawn, but if the king moves, then of course the pawn wants to march forward. Queen to e4, and now king to d1. We have bishop to f5. Now, if the white queen moves from the defense of the c2 square, then we just have a very nice queen c2, queen c1 checkmate. So here, rook back to b2, gaining more control over the c2 square, and now comes rook to d3. A beautiful, beautiful move by Harry, offering a full rook, but for what? That's the question. So what can you play here? If you do absolutely nothing, you could play something like knight to g5. This is possible, but rook captures on f3 is basically the idea. If the queen moves, you could play something like queen to a5, offer the knight, and then try to harass the king from the d8 square. This is possible, but also knight to g5 is very nice. I'm just going to show it. For example, knight g5, h captures with check, and after bishop captures, now you accept the rook, and now after queen to f3 check, king to c1, queen captures on f2, attacks the rook. For example, rook goes here, bishop captures on d3. It's similar to what happened in the game without the knight actually being traded, but you get this position where white kind of should be better, but what would you rather play here, white or black? I mean, the bishop pair, those are absolute monsters. everyone takes black here. So in the game, white accepted the rook e captures on d3. We have queen captures on f3 with check, king to c1, and now bishop captures on d3. So it's basically a position where a bishop pair is fighting against the rook pair, but the rook pair really has no files to use to attack the black king, and the bishops are just monsters. This is basically the definition of the bishop pair from hell. So here we have rook to b4, and now queen captures on f2, attacking this rook, so rook to h1, and now pawn to h5, not allowing this pawn to advance any further, keeping it as a target here. We have rook to a4 going after the a7 pawn, but for the moment it is defended. You could also use it to deliver some checks along the sixth rank. So here a5. It's a very cheeky move. Point is, if the a pawn is captured, white just crumbles. For example, if queen captures on a5, just queen to d4, and now you can. There's no defense against queen to a1 checkmate. That's just it. The king has no good squares. And if you try, for example, rook captures here, then it's also a very nice queen to b6. Now attacking, putting pressure on the rook, but basically just threatening checkmate. So the queen can't really be used to defend against checkmate. Something like queen to b2, then just the rook falls. So you'd have to play king to d1, but it's not enough. Queen to b1 with check, and once the queen defends, there's the you can play bishop captures here. This also works, but bishop to c2 check. This also works, but queen to b6. Queen to b7 is actually the move that wins the game on the spot. I mean, just a beautiful continuation here with black. You're attacking the rook, and there's no way to defend it. Once you move the rook, queen to f3 check will deliver check, king e1, and then of course queen to e2 will be checkmate, and there's no good defense against this. So those are your options if you actually capture the pawn. So the a5 pawn is the most poisonous pawn you've ever seen. So here rook to d1, a very nice way of defending, because now the same idea no longer applies. Here we have queen to b6, and now queen to b2. This can now be played because you don't have to worry about bishop captures here. Otherwise, queen captures would just be met with queen b1 checkmate. And now you could capture easily with the rook, or if the rook wasn't there, for example, captures, you lose the queen. So the rook is essential here. So queen to c5 now, we have rook to a3, and now king to f5. Now black wants to get the king deeper into the position, and even if pieces get traded down, then maybe those pawns can start marching forward. We have queen to c3, now again putting pressure on the a5 pawn, and queen b5, again threatening checkmate. Sorry, I don't know why I played queen b6. Queen b5 threatening checkmate. Queen b2 again defending, and now queen to c6. We have queen back to c3. White would be very happy with a draw here now, but black just continues. Pawn to f6 and offers the a5 pawn. But the difference is now the pawn can be captured. We have queen captures on a5. Queen to b7, again threatening checkmate, and now you can't really put anything to block this checkmate, so you have to play rook captures on d3. It is the only move that keeps white in the game. So rook captures, c captures on d3, and now queen to c3. And okay, now white has a passed pawn. White is still up the exchange, but if black gets those pawns marching forward, anything could happen. So here we have queen to a6, queen to b3, and now we have king to e4. We have pawn to a4, and now king to f3. And here there is a very interesting continuation. For example, if you go queen to d5 check, it's basically a forced draw. King to f2, you're going to play queen to c5 with check, king to e2, and now you can play rook to e1 check, give up a rook, and you have a perpetual queen to g1. And now, of course, there's only two squares: king e2, queen g2 check, king e1, queen to g1 check, king e2, queen g2, and so on. You get a nice draw. But here in the game, rook to e1 was played, and I mean, why not? Now queen to d1 check is possible, and if white is allowed to play this, then black will just get checkmated. But here white missed one very important move. So feel free to pause the video and try to win the game, but not just the game, and the entire Chessable British Championship for Harry while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on moving even deeper into the position with your king. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is king to f2. This prevents queen to d1 as it no longer comes with check. Now if you try something like queen to d1, there's really no point because just queen to c4 check, and after let's say king to b2, you're going to play queen to b4 check, king to a1. Now you play queen to a3 with check, king to b1, and now or rather even you don't have to deliver this check, you can just play bishop captures here, and there is no way to save this game. Once you get out of checks, just bishop to c3 will end the game. For example, you deliver one check, king to e3, and now there really isn't all that much you can do. You can play queen to f3 check, king to d4, but the black king escapes. There are just too many pawns and the bishop is here, so you can easily hide, let's say queen f2, king to c3, and now there really aren't no more useful checks, and that's just it. Now you get checkmated. So that's what happens if you play queen to d1 now. So in the game, rook to e4 was played, but now pawn to f5. Everything comes now with tempo. The rook is attacked, rook to c4, and now pawn to e4. And now look at this beautiful structure here. We have queen to c3, now comes king to e2. We have pawn to a5, and now queen to h6. Now putting pressure on the d2 pawn, and there's no way to defend it. Bishop captures is coming. It is attacked 3 times, so there's no way to save it. So you have to play king to b1 if you don't want to lose your queen. Bishop captures on d2 now, queen to b2, and now queen to e6, attacking the rook here. So rook to c5, and now pawn to f4. We have queen to b5, now comes pawn to f3. Rook to e5 attacks the queen, just queen to g6. We have pawn to a6. White will get another queen into the game, but so will black. Pawn to f2. We have rook to f5, keeping an eye on the f1 square. You will have to give up your rook for the pawn at some point. Bishop to e3 now, and queen to b2 with check. We have d2. And now pawn to a7. There's no good way to play this. Bishop captures is possible, but there's no reason to do it right away. So queen captures on f5. a8 bringing a queen into the game, and now f1 bringing a queen into the game with check. So now there are 4 queens on the board, but as it often is, the player who delivers the queen into the game with check usually has a forced continuation, and this game is no different. Here we have king to a2, but now it's a forced checkmate in 6, and there are quite a few ways to do it. You could play queen f7, queen to e6 check. In the game, e6 check was played, king a3, bishop to c5 with check, king a4, and now queen to c4 with check. We have king to a5, and now a beautiful finish, a nice queen sacrifice for checkmate. It's not as impressive as you have more than one queen, but still, queen to a1 with check, queen captures on a1, and now queen to b4 check, forcing the king to a6, and now queen to b6 is checkmate. So really a spectacular game where you have a perfect example of how one player gets outplayed right out of the opening. Here Matthew really surprised Harry with this a knight move, and he really gets the advantage. But even though this is sort of an advantage because let's say, okay, let's throw in a few more moves. Okay, this is the position. You have a rook for a bishop, and you are of course clearly better, and you know that you are clearly better, but you've seen how much easier it is to find moves for black than it is to find moves for white, as the bishop pair is just so strong. It's very hard to stress this enough. Like when you're at the absolute top level, like maybe 2700, okay, then you will take maybe advantage of this position with white, but not every game. You know, it's so just because you win the exchange, your opponent, you know, you won the rook, but your opponent gains this diagonal for the rest of the game. It's definitely a trade-off. I wouldn't call that gaining an advantage, but a very interesting game. And Harry doesn't win just this game, but he also wins the entire Chessable British Championship. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and that little bit of news at the beginning about the sort of the acquisition of Play Magnus group via chess.com. So hope you enjoyed that as well. I would like to thank Gabriel Rodriguez, Ivan Sterling, John Austin, Andre Schrade, and Dixit Varma for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.